One more comment here. Demas, would you circle that for you Bible students? Why, John? Because listen, Luke, the beloved physician, and Demas greets you. I point this out to you because in the book of Philemon, right around verse 24, Demas is called a fellow servant. Philemon was written before Colossians by about a couple of years. Demas, my fellow servant, greets you, Paul says. But now here, 2 years later, he just says, Demas greets you. 6 years approximately after this, depending on how you date the letters, there's a third mention of Demas. Right before Paul dies, Paul says, Demas has forsaken us, having loved this present world. You see Demas going from a fellow servant to just Demas. He greets you. To he's forsaken us. He's turned his back on the Lord. He's left the ministry because he loves the present world. He's in apostasy. Why do I point this out? Understand this, please. Let he who has ears to hear what the Spirit would say. The Christian experience, if you're not careful, if I'm not careful, if we don't learn, if we don't see what the Word speaks of illustratively, we too, a fellow servant at one point in our life, used by the Lord, walking with the Lord, bearing fruit for the Lord, just sort of then become just Demas, a person. No longer our lives impacting or bearing fruit the way they once did. We get distracted. And then, as it goes on, 6, 8 years down the tracks, we turn our backs on the Lord altogether. It happens. The Christian life is like a steam locomotive. Man, when you're saved and you're on fire, you're stoking that boiler with wood, you know. Boom, you're in the scriptures, you're coming to church, you're involved in ministry, you're stoking it, man, and you're stoked. And you steam and you're moving, man. And then pretty soon you start to say, hey, I'm cruising along. I don't need to feed the fire. I can just rest. I don't need to study the scripture. I don't need to have devotions. I don't need to go to church. Because look, I'm really moving. And here's the deal. A steam locomotive chugging down the tracks can go a great while, and the passengers who are on board, they don't even notice what's happening. That is, slowly, almost imperceptibly, once the fire is stopped being fed the wood, the engine starts slowing down, but it keeps going for a long time, right down the tracks. And everybody thinks, cool, I'm trucking. Things are going fine. But it's going slower and slower, almost imperceptibly slowing down until suddenly, boom, it's dead in the tracks. It's stopped. What happened? It might take a year or 2 or 8. You might be able to go on the fire that you've stoked up by being in the Word, being a man or a woman of prayer. You might be able to go for weeks, months, even years on the momentum you've gained, but you are going to stop dead in your tracks, and you're going to say, what happened? What's wrong? How did I get here? How did this come about? Why did that take place? I don't get it. And you know what? It happened way, way back down the tracks when you stopped feeding the fire. Demas, a fellow servant. Demas, just plain Demas. Demas, a man who has forsaken us. Sad, sad story that the scriptures give to us as a warning. You know what this scares me? In a good way. Because I know that Applegate Fellowship, I know that personally, me personally, can say, hey, we're cruising. Hey, we're going. And we can stop feeding the fire and then find ourselves stopped dead and say, what happened? One of the greatest problems that I've observed is people that go on momentum and are not stoking the fire daily. You can go quite a while. But man, when the train stops, it's always a sad, sad day. Ask Demas. Well,